This is an unfortunate one. The oldest survivor of the Tulsa race massacre just died. She was 111 years old. Viola Fletcher. She never got to see her justice. And anyone else that was around during that time, they never got to see justice. I want to show everybody a picture of her here. Again, Viola Fletcher, the oldest survivor of the Tulsa race massacre, dies at 111. At 7 years old, she bore witness to one of America's most violent spasms of racial violence. She was 106 when the nation reckoned with the crime. So that's Viola Fletcher. I have to say this. I watched this woman testify in front of Congress, which you'll see in just a second. I watched her plead with judges in Oklahoma, and she was not alone. And it is an atrocity what happened to the Black Wall Streets in this country. Tulsa is the most popular one, but there were others I'll show you later on. But this idea that after slavery, there were Black communities that went on to build, and some of them built towns that were so successful that it was considered a Black Wall Street, where all the businesses were Black owned and the dollar continued to turn in the Black community. All those neighborhoods were burned to the ground. And it reminds me of, a lot of the things we talk about today. A lot of people talking about what is happening in the West Bank, which we've covered multiple times on the show. You have to understand, when you see those settlers in the West Bank burn down houses, steal them from Palestinians, those things happen here too. And this is something that this country has to reckon with. It's not just Tulsa. It's, Seneca Village, which is now Central Park in New York City, where people moved on and they built their own towns that were thriving and had their own schools and their own businesses. And one after another, it was either burned down or the city took it via eminent domain. And if you see my documentary, Removed, Black Erasure in Boston, you'll see that's one of the things that we focused on, how these communities were building and growing and thriving, and the city would come in and just wipe them all out via eminent domain. Viola Fletcher did testify, as I said, in front of Congress. This is when she was 107 years old. I want you to hear some of the things that she said during this time. And then we're going to get into Barack Obama's statement about this and why I point my finger at holding him responsible too. Listen to this.
Viola Fletcher. I'm the daughter of Lucinda Ellis and John Wesley Ford of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm the sister of Hughes Van Ellis, who's also here today. I'm a survivor of the Tulsa Race Massacre. 2 weeks ago, I celebrated my 107th birthday. Today, I'm visiting Washington, D.C. for the first time in my life. I'm here seeking justice, and I'm asking my country to acknowledge what happened in Tulsa in 1921. On May 31st in 21, I went to bed at my family's home in Greenwood. Neighbors of Tulsa, the neighborhood I fell asleep in that night, was rich, not just in terms of wealth, but in culture, community, heritage, and my family had a beautiful home. We had great neighbors, and I had friends to play with. I felt safe. I had everything a child could need. I had a bright future ahead of me. Greenwood could, Still, Greenwood should have given me the chance to truly make it in this country. Within a few hours, all of that was gone. The night of the massacre, I was awakened by my family. My parents and 5 siblings were there. I was told we had to leave, and that was it. I will never forget the violence of the white mob when we left our home. I still see black men being shot, black bodies lying in the street. I still smell smoke and see fire. I still see black businesses being burned. I still hear airplanes flying overhead. I hear the screams. I have lived through the massacre every day. Our country may forget this history, but I cannot. I will not. And other survivors do not. And our descendants do not. When my family was forced to leave Tulsa, I lost my chance of an education. I never finished school past the 4th grade.
This is the disruption that I was talking about before, right? Like a lot of this leads back to disruption. When people are uprooted from their communities by force, you are starting all over again. And considering the time, like I said, like they were able to build and they were able to establish businesses like in that community, and Greenwood was thriving. But that's the thing, is like every time Black communities during that time, every time they started to get to a point where they were thriving, and sometimes some of the Black businesses were doing what some would say too well, they were burned down. Why? I'll tell you why. The part that people still don't want to reckon with is the fact that when slaves were brought to this country, they were brought here to be nothing more than property. Slaves were never brought here with the intention of becoming citizens of this country. They were never brought here with the intentions of owning land, owning property. They were only brought here to be property. This is something I think a lot of people need to learn how to reckon with, and that includes some on the progressive left as well. One thing about this show is that we talk about all oppressed groups. We don't just talk about one. And this right here has not been repaired. Viola was a great example to point to as someone who was still alive. When people tell me that happened a long time ago, people don't stop and think about the fact that I was the first person in my family to go to an integrated school. My parents went to segregated schools. My grandparents, my great-grandparents all went to segregated schools under the law. It was not that long ago. Do people not get this? First person in my family to go to an integrated school. When communities were burned to the ground, and every time that eminent domain was implemented to knock down and destroy Black communities, that is disruption. And you have to start all over again. You are stopping and taking away generational wealth. These things happen. This country needs to reckon with it and admit that it happened and implement repair. I would not sit up here and tell you that the Palestinians in the West Bank don't deserve repair. They do. But where I struggle is that even in some of the progressive spaces on the ground here in Massachusetts, in Boston, they don't want to touch this issue. They want to fight for groups. But as soon as you bring up what happened to Black people in this country, oh, that's devices. I'm walking away from that one. People say that they think that's something that's only in conservative spaces. That's not true. I have seen that in organizing spaces, organizing progressive spaces right here in Massachusetts. So it's not about, for me, it's not about making people feel guilty. For me, it's about implementing repair and acknowledging what happened. And you can't do that by ignoring it and saying that was a long time ago. A lot of things were a long time ago, right? But this really wasn't that long ago. She's still alive. Let's go on a little bit more.
I have never made much money in my country. State and city took a lot from me. Despite this, I spent time supporting the war effort in the shipyards of California. But most of my life, I was a domestic worker serving white families. I never made much money, but to this day, I can barely afford my everyday needs. All the while, the city of this Tulsa have unjustly used the names and stories of victims like me to enrich myself and its white allies through the 30s million, through the 30s million ways. By the
Pause here. She said she did not make much money. So what people have to understand again is her family went from owning a home to no ownership. So one of the ways that you increase your net worth is through home ownership. And there is a difference between net worth and income. You can make $80,000 a year, but if you don't own shit and you have a lot of debt, your net worth is going to be very low. It is because of reasons like this that we have gotten to the point in this country where it is predicted right now that as of 2050, Black net worth in this country will be $0. And we can't talk about that without addressing the fact that this happened. This happened. Yes, I think that's Sheila Jackson Lee holding up the phone. I think that's Sheila. Yeah, Sheila Jackson Lee was holding up the phone there. She was there.
The Tulsa Centennial Commissioner while I was continued to live in poverty. I am a 107-year-old and have never been seen justice. I pray that one day I will. I have been blessed with a long life and have seen the best and the worst of this country. I think about the terror, horror inflicted upon Black people in this country every day.
So at that point, she said that she hoped that she would see some type of justice. She was 107 years old at that point in time. That was Viola Fletcher testifying in front of Congress. Now, later on, I do want to show you guys this. This was aired 3 months ago, and it's unfortunate this did not go forward. But there were activists that were trying to help her have a home. This was broadcast in Tulsa, Oklahoma on their local news station just 3 months ago.
Tulsa Mayor Monroe Nichols announced an initiative earlier this summer to raise more than $100 million to address systemic impacts of the 1921 race massacre.
But that does not include money going directly to survivors. News on 6's Ethan Wright is live with how an online fundraiser hopes to give one of the survivors something special. Ethan?
Craig and Lori, 104 years after surviving the 1921 Tulsa race massacre, mother Viola Fletcher is still waiting on something that she says she's never had. That's a home to call her own. Mother Fletcher has lived through 2 world wars, the civil rights movement, and the Tulsa race massacre.
And what she had taken away from her is something that is also seen as like the proverbial American dream, just simply a home.
And now she's sharing a small room with her 110-year-old roommate.
Not only is she living in a senior living home, but she shares a roommate in like a freshman dorm sized space.
In 2021, Fletcher was living in a 1-bedroom Bartlesville apartment. Now she lives in one of the nicest nursing homes in Tulsa, and though she's grateful, Mother Fletcher says she's ready for something more.
She's really been focusing on supporting her family, and now we're hopeful that the community can focus on supporting her.
Her grandson, Ike Howard, drives from Texas to help when he can, but now a nationwide campaign called A Home to Inherit is hoping to give her something different. The effort launched via social media last week with a goal to raise $1 million. Organizers Dion Osborne and Andrew Sartain say the money will go directly to Fletcher and her family for a house in her name, medical equipment, and 24-hour care.
We just really hope that the community wants to come through and give her last days the dignity that was denied to her during the Tulsa race massacre.
So notice how once again the community stepped up. So she went to Congress to testify. She spoke in front of the judge in Oklahoma. Like, she went to the politicians, which is usually like the first step a lot of people will take. But look who stepped up to try to help. The people in the community.
Fletcher told Andrew and Dion if she had a place to truly call her own, she could live another 5 years.
The state has said repeatedly no. And so we're asking the world to say yes.
Everybody heard that? The state said no. The survivors did bring this case forward again to the state, as he said, and the judge shot it down. Now, for the people like Coleman Cruz Hughes, who say, well, no, these people aren't living, so you can't pass this on, These people were living. She's the oldest one. But you won't hear him talk about this. Because people kind of have their own agenda. Let's keep it real. He also doesn't want justice for Palestinians either, so I guess that doesn't surprise me. But in comes Barack Obama, and this is the thing I have to say here. Barack Obama issued a statement about Viola Fletcher, and honestly, he pretends as though he was never president and didn't have a DOJ of his own. This is what Barack Obama said. As a survivor of the Tulsa race massacre, Viola Fletcher bravely shared her story so well that we'd never forget this painful part of our history. Michelle and I are grateful for her lifelong work to advance civil rights and send our love to her family. Okay, Barack. So here's the thing. Barack Obama was president for 2 election terms. He had 2 terms, 2 consecutive terms. During that time, why didn't Barack Obama's DOJ investigate the situation? Why didn't Barack Obama put this on Front Street during that time? Why didn't Barack Obama, it just kills me when people pass away. But when you were in a position of power, why didn't you use your position, your pulpit at that point in time to implement an investigation into this matter so that this woman and the other survivors could get justice? Why didn't he do that? Because everybody wants to come forward with these statements now and say, oh gosh, we are so sorry for her loss. She fought for this, she fought for that. But when you were in a position of power, you say nothing, man. And I point you back to that time when Barack Obama was in Flint, Michigan, and he pretended to drink that dirty water in front of a room full of Black people. So this is why politicians cannot be your heroes. They can't be your savior. For Barack Obama to pretend as though he was never in a position of power where he could have elevated this or at least implemented an investigation is disingenuous. But he wasn't there to do those things. I'll take you back to a speech that Barack Obama made at Morehouse just to show you why he was not going to do something like that. Shout out to DAP, ADOS Tribe, who shared this video. I forgot about this, but listen very carefully to what Obama says here.
I understand there's a common fraternity creed here at Morehouse. Excuses are tools of the incompetent, used to build bridges to nowhere and monuments of nothingness. Well, we've got no time for excuses. Not because the bitter legacy of slavery and segregation have vanished entirely, they have not. Not because racism and discrimination no longer exist. We know those are still out there. It's just that in today's hyper-connected, hyper-competitive world with millions of young people from China and India and Brazil, many of whom started with a whole lot less than all of you did, all of them entering the global workforce alongside you, nobody is going to give you anything that you have not earned.
So even at this time, Barack Obama was well aware of the Tulsa massacre, well aware of Viola Fletcher. And he makes this statement that nobody is going to give you anything. Yes, these things happen, but there's other people who came here and they're doing well. And I want to explain to you why this statement is so problematic. Because they did not go through what descendants of slavery went through in this country. Viola Fletcher's community was burned to the ground. Her family lost generational wealth. and there was no repair. The US government never came forward and said, we are going to, you know what, we got to fix this. We are going to implement reparations to descendants of American slavery. The closest we got to that was the General Sherman Promise, which at some point started 40 acres and a mule. But from what I understand, Andrew Jackson put an end to that. Then the civil rights movement, then the Jim Crow laws, then the redlining, then the urban renewal, mass incarceration, the war on drugs. These things continued over time. It's not just about slavery. So for Barack Obama to say that, knowing damn well what happened to descendants of slavery in this country, it's not just disingenuous, but it's blasphemy, in my opinion. So we should not do anything for you. We shouldn't implement repair for you because there are other people who came here and they're doing well. What does that have to do with the crimes and the harms that took place in this country from those who were enslaved and their descendants? This is a dangerous rhetoric. And I've been saying this for a long time. And the progressives, they need to get on board with this too. Because this is what I said before about even in some of these progressive organizing spaces here on the ground, you can mention everybody else, but the moment you ask for repair for descendants of American slavery in this country, they don't want to deal with that. They'll tell you it's divisive, but it's not divisive to fight for everybody else. No, we have a problem in this country. And I'm not afraid to say that. And the problem is we have too many people who are afraid to say that. Then we had a Black president who basically just said, well, yeah, that he described repair as a handout instead of a debt that is owed. And then you guys sit back and you wonder why. You wonder why he hasn't been more vocal about the Palestinians. He's not vocal about us here. Why would he be vocal about people far away? And so many people, they stood up and they clapped because he was Obama. They clapped for this, not realizing what he was actually saying. We'll go back a little bit more because there's another part here.
Give you anything that you have not earned. Nobody cares how tough your upbringing was. Nobody cares if you suffered some discrimination.
You see this? So this is a problem. This is a problem. And this is why I'm registered, no party affiliation, because I call all of these people out, both parties out. I'm not going to sit up here and defend what Barack Obama said just because he was a Democrat. At the time when Barack Obama ran, I was really excited about Barack Obama in 2008. I voted for Barack Obama. I really thought we were going to get change. I was fooled. So for those of you who feel like you've been fooled recently or lately, I was fooled too. But Barack Obama shouldn't get a pass just because, oh, he's the first Black president. That doesn't mean you give him a pass because of that. What did he do for the Black community? Because he did things for other communities. Do you think Barack Obama would have stood in front of the ADL or, I don't know, stood in front of at an AIPAC convention and made that same statement that no one's going to give you a handout? So what's really the problem? What's in it for them? There are tools of white supremacy that are used against us. And it's not always white people. Black people have been used as tools of white supremacy too. It's a system. And when I think about the fact that Viola Fletcher has now died at 111 years old and she never got justice that she was fighting for, it makes me sick to my stomach. Barack Obama in this speech, he's not just talking to me when he makes those statements, he's talking about my parents. He's talking about my grandparents, my great-grandparents. People who had nothing. People who worked their asses off. And so what is in it for them? What's in it for them is that they continue to enrich the corporations. They continue to put a pat on the back for the billionaire class. The reality is that giving the Tulsa massacre survivors what they are owed, implementing some type of reparations for descendants of slavery in this country, that is a threat to the system of white supremacy. And it is also a threat to the corporate class. Because they won't say this out loud, but I'll go ahead and tell you. If Black people get more money, get what's owed to us, the reality is that means that we might be living in some of the same neighborhoods. We might be able to establish counter businesses that some of the white billionaires have. We may become a vibrant force in this nation, and they don't want that. Look at the way they urgently push reparations and other legislation just recently for Jewish Americans. Look at the way they operate, how they do that. Mention us, best we can do is a study. But you had survivors right here. So it's a sad day that she has passed away and she did not receive justice. And this is not something that people need to continue shying away talking about. People have to continue to talk about this. The other Black Wall Streets, I'll show you here. People were asking about that. Other Black Wall Streets. Greenwood is the most popular one. That's the one we were talking about in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Haiti and Durham, North Carolina. Jackson Ward in Richmond, Virginia. It was known as the Harlem of the South. The 15th Ward in Syracuse, New York. Bronzeville in Chicago, Illinois. Sweet Auburn in Atlanta, Georgia. West 9th Street in Little Rock, Arkansas. Ferris Street in Jackson, Mississippi. 7th Street in West Oakland, California. The most popular one, like I said, is Greenwood. But if you live in North Carolina, and I know quite a bit of you do, you need to know Durham, North Carolina as well. So we lost a lot. And I just feel like Barack Obama has some nerve. Some nerve. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.